we got to the point of basically agreeing terms and valuation and things at about the middle of March, and we all know what happened then. And so a lot of very frantic questions of, what's the plan to deal with this? What's the how are we going to take this technology into different areas? Do we need to pivot? Do we sit on our cash and wait it out? What's the right strategy call? We provide updates to them on a quarterly basis. We don't gloss it, we don't spin it. We give them the facts of what's happened and what's worked and what hasn't. I am Robert from Spotta, one of the founders and CEO. We're developing technologies for monitoring insects in forests, farms, accommodation, and a range of other applications.
And how did you get into this? Why did you start this business?
So my background is engineering. My co-founder and I, we both studied at Cambridge doing electronic and information engineering. We spent the first 5-6 years of our careers working on Formula One sensors, medical implants, anywhere where you had to do really tough sensing challenges. We came across insect monitoring as a space through talking to one of the world's biggest pest control companies and realized that basically the technology hasn't moved for decades. And we thought, we can go a bit further than a better mousetrap. We can do something really game-changing here. There's a lot of insects, nobody really knows when they arrive or how quickly they grow. But early warning is critical because they grow exponentially when there's food available. So catching them early makes a huge difference. And in a world where everyone is trying to reduce insecticide use, they're trying to cut back on the labor of inspecting. This current situation of someone walking around with a clipboard looking at bits of sticky paper doesn't really cut it anymore. And that's where we got started from there.
And insects cause issues for a range of sectors, and we've touched upon it just while we've been speaking, from sort of hospitality, tourism to agriculture. So how did you decide where to start to really prove this as a technology?
Sure. So we picked hospitality as our first market back in 2018. That seemed like a really good place to start. It's it's indoors, it's a controlled environment. There's a very high value product. Hotels are charging £100-200 a night. Taking that out of service for any length of time to deal with a pest issue costs them a lot of money. Looking back at that from the beginning of 2021, seeing what's happened to hospitality through 2020, that with hindsight maybe wasn't the best choice. But given what we knew at the time, it seemed like a pretty solid place to start. It was a product that we could launch and get to market quickly. But since then, we've now really branched out into a whole range of other applications because our technology is very transferable to any insect, really.
And although the tech's the same and the outcome is more or less the same, what's the real differences for you as a team when talking to people from these different backgrounds?
So the nature of the pain that they feel, as classic approach to any business development, you're thinking about what is the pain, what's the problem that I'm solving here. And the problem for hotels is reputation. Everything in that industry is reputation. If you can save them from one bad review on TripAdvisor where someone sticks a picture of an arm that's been bitten or something like that, that's worth a vast amount of money to them. You take that same technology and you apply it to forestry or agriculture, where you're not looking at a reaction time of a week, you're looking at what's going to happen this year, or in the case of forestry, what's going to happen 40 years from now. It's about yield, it's about time investment, it's about avoiding the inaccuracies caused by having someone drive long distances and have to wander through a field or a forest. It's a very different proposition to hospitality.
And for you as the founder then, so getting into this, starting the business, what are some of the things that you had to get in place to really prove this as a technology before bringing money into the equation and raising funds?
Well, the biggest question is, could we actually recognize different insects? There are a lot of people out there. People have been making traps for insects for decades, and there are well-tried solutions for that. But having something that you could turn that into a smart device that could run for a long period of time without someone needing to go and check it every few weeks, because if you do that, you might as well just be looking for the insects yourself. We set right from the beginning that our monitors need to be able to survive a year without servicing, and that's tough outdoors. If you've got a vision system running, the sort of thing that's used for autonomous vehicles or recognizing people in crowds, cramming that down into a small cheap device that can run for a year off a single AA is not straightforward. And that's at the core of our technology, is how we've done that. So proving that was the biggest technical hurdle, definitely.
And what was the process like for you when you'd achieved that, and it was then time to start talking to investors and really rolling this out?
Yeah, so we got to the point in about 2018 there, we got to what works like prototype that we were content was going to do the job. We'd done a lot of experiments with live insects, set up an entomology lab and done that. And we were ready to, and we secured the first couple of customers. And that, classic start point of getting some angel investment in. So we've done 2 funding rounds to date. The first of those was with Cambridge Angels, and the second was a mix of Cambridge Angels and some global VCs who joined for a second round in 2020. And that process, the transition from R&D skunk works into proper business, doing it, with customers and revenue and building a sales team. That transition is something that every startup goes through, or every successful startup goes through. I think our journey in that was pretty typical, in that it's you've tried things, some things work, some things don't. You've got to keep trying different angles. We've expanded into new markets given the external pressures, but I think overall the trend has been very positive.
And it must be a positive sign, and I guess a bit of a confidence booster, that you started in hospitality with this product, and you managed to actually raise funds in 2020 during the pandemic.
Yeah, that was a hairy experience. We went to market to go and to raise money in January, end of January 2020. We'd had a load of good conversations, and we had some fantastic support from our first round investors, who nearly all stuck in and backed us for the second round as well. And we got to the point of basically agreeing terms and valuation and things at about the middle of March, and we all know what happened then. And so a lot of very frantic questions of, what's the plan to deal with this? How are we going to take this technology into different areas? Do we need to pivot? Do we sit on our cash and wait it out? What's the right strategy call here? But we were able to build a strong business plan in the face of that, and close the round in May 2020, bringing in about more than half of the round was new investors, a lot of support from the existing investors. That was, but it forced us to think through the detail of how we're going to scale and diversify this technology. We couldn't just rely on rolling out the thing we had to hospitality and then using that as a cash cow to fund future products. We needed to put a strategy in place for how are we going to address these other sectors. And that's really starting to pay dividends now. It was a painful year, but it really is starting to make a difference, because we're now in a position where we have a product in agriculture that we're doing field trials in. We have a product that we're launching in forestry, and we never would have been in that situation with that breadth if we hadn't had to do that thinking at the beginning of 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that you mentioned there a couple of times was the fact that your original investors, a good chunk of those actually supported you in the latest round as well.
Yeah.
That acts as a real sort of check of approval in the investor world and when speaking to other investors. So tell me a bit about your stakeholder management with the original investors, and how did you keep them interested and updated and so on, so
yeah,
they want to support you on the second round?
Yeah, so our first investment round that we closed at the beginning of 2019, that was with a group of angel investors, predominantly Cambridge Angels and Cambridge Capital Group. So there was 13 of individual members on the cap table at that stage. So quite a diverse group, a whole range of different backgrounds. A lot of them are exited entrepreneurs themselves, who have, and have the battle scars to know what's coming. But we also had some very good people joining at that stage who were, for example, a partner at a major IP firm, got involved to do a review of our IP, and at the end of that decided he wanted to invest. So must have liked what he's seen. But that management, they're a pretty well organized, well coordinated bunch. They're very familiar at doing deals in groups together. So one of them joined the board and has been a really proactive member of the board in helping to drive the business forward, and I rely on his advice a lot with the growth and the strategy of the business. We provide updates to them on a quarterly basis. We don't gloss it, we don't spin it. We give them the facts of what's happened and what's worked and what hasn't. I think they find that fairly refreshing compared to a lot of startups where there's a lot of spin and a lot of maybe excessive optimism would be the way to phrase that. We try hard not to do that. obviously we celebrate our victories, but we don't try and hide the things that aren't working either. And I think that straightforward approach with them is why they then had the faith to stick with us when clearly we were in a position of some vulnerability, building, trying to sell a product into hospitality at the beginning of 2020.
And clearly that strategy's worked in the longer term, that some of them have reinvested. On a case-by-case basis, when you're going to them and perhaps you don't have the best news for them, what was the reaction? Did they offer support and advice, or what was it a fact that you could feel they were worried, or what was that like?
No, very much the former. It was a very strong pull together of, we've made a commitment to supporting this business, and let's find a way of making it work. We all believe, and we set ours on the table right at the beginning, that our long-term vision for this business is to be the technology solution for insect pests, full stop, across every sector, every application of that. And then, that's a vast opportunity, because it's $320 billion of damage a year done by insects. Something like 20% of all the crops grown don't make it off the field because of insects. So yes, of course, there were some nerves. Is this company going to be able to survive this disruption? But ultimately, was bought into that long-term vision, and we've been very clear on that from the beginning. And therefore, success or failure in that first market was important, but it didn't shake the fundamentals of the business, that there were plenty of opportunities out there, and stick with it, we will get the right one, and this is going to be a massive success.
And what were the changes that came in once funding was secured? What were the big changes?
They weren't dramatic, actually. I think because my co-founder and I, this is not our first business together. We've been running and employing people for many years. It wasn't as though we were, under performing in terms of corporate governance and managing things. Having another voice at the table was very useful in when we're deciding on strategy. Someone who'd been there and done a high growth startup before. Our experience was more in consultancy businesses. So that was really valuable. Some of the people who joined as advisors to the company have, they have 40, 50 companies in their portfolio, and they've seen every aspect of that. So that has been really useful. A lot of valuable introductions as well. So we're fortunate that our the classic smart money. Absolutely, everybody who we have never accepted dumb money. Everybody who's invested in the company, there's been an element of us choosing them as well as them choosing us. We were fortunate enough to be in that position, and at both of our investment rounds, we actually turned away some investors because we were oversubscribed, which was nice to be in that position. We were fortunate, but that meant that there haven't been big disruptions. And even at our second round, where we brought in a VC into the fold alongside the angels, that can be, for a lot of companies, a big source of tension. But because we'd spent time building the relationships with both of them, and they'd got to know each other in the process of it, that has actually been working really extremely well so far.
And that position of being oversubscribed is a great problem to have. But I suppose you do have to be conscious of how you let people down with future rounds in mind. So any advice on that?
We did it in a pretty straightforward way, that we gave first refusal to existing investors. That's most investors will have that written into an investment agreement anyway. So that's so our first investors from the first round got first refusal on the second round, and then after that it was a pretty straightforward case of the people who we progressed the conversations with quickest were the ones who were most interested in us, and we were most interested in them, and it quite naturally led to the people who came along later. If they wanted to join in, and unfortunately this round is full now. We've got full quota, but would love to keep you involved, and we now send them the investor updates, those interested parties, as if they were stakeholders in the business, and we hope that they'll join us at the next opportunity.
Yeah, very interesting. And those that have come on board, they're obviously fully on board with quite a grand ambition to cover all sectors. So what are the nearer term goals for the business over the next year or two?
So this year, we're really focusing on demonstrating traction in all three of the core areas for us. So accommodation, our first product in there, that market is going to start recovering this year. We were we were right in the foothills of some pretty rapid growth. A lot of leads, a lot of good interest at the beginning of coronavirus. That was paused. It's starting to unpause now. The other two sectors, we've used 2020 to really push through to having a product completed. So we're expecting first significant revenue in both of those. So the two pests we're looking at there are pine weevil, which is Hylovis abetus, which is a pest that affects forestry in particularly Scotland and northern England, but also across Scandinavia and Central Europe. And then red palm weevil, which is a pest that's been spreading very rapidly through the Middle East, Southern Europe, North Africa. Does about $2 billion of damage a year and has been growing at 40% a year in the last few years. So it's a huge growing problem. The UN spent £400 million trying to support businesses and governments in those areas to stop the spread of it. And it's driven by climate change, really. Climate change and the regulations around pesticide use. It's tidal wave is perhaps a bit of a evocative way of phrasing it, but there are a lot of people who are very fearful for their livelihoods because it's decimating the region, and we hope that we can be part of the solution to that.
Absolutely, it sounds like an exciting future, both near and longer term as well. So, for those listening, where can they find out more about both yourself and the business?
Well, the first place would be spotta.co, our website. They get a good overview of that. But then emailing us if there's anybody interested from an investment point of view or collaborations and partnerships. Always interested to hear from you. The contact details again on our website.